Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA Injury Watch video for Wednesday, March 30th. The idea of this Injury Watch video is we get a lot of questions right before lineup block about, well, if this guy's out, should I be playing this guy? Or now that they announced this guy's going to be out, who does that benefit the most? So what we wanted to do is kind of get a video out to you guys early in the day with some of the news that's kind of hanging on the fence right there. This way, if it does break one way or the other, you'll know who's going to benefit or who you're going to tick down depending on how this all works out. So let's call up the slideshow, and I'll show you guys a little bit about what we're talking about here. There are three main injury situations that we're looking at right now. The first one is the Dallas Mavericks point guard spot. The next one we're going to talk about is what to do with the Phoenix Suns big men. And then finally, it gets its own category. It's just the New Orleans Pelicans, because there are so many injuries and so much going on over there that we figured we would just talk about everything and kind of give you guys our thoughts on, who's in a good spot, who's not, who even benefits right now. So the first thing we want to talk about is the Dallas Mavericks. Now, we have guys like Darren Williams, who's going to likely be out today. He's listed as doubtful. Very good chance he doesn't play. You already have Chandler Parsons out, and Zaza Pachulia has been in and out of the lineup, but even when he's in, he's only playing 8 to 10 minutes. So that's going to open up a lot of minutes for guys in the Dallas Mavericks. Now, the big role that I think most people are wondering about is, what do you do with the guard spot here? Well, basically, JJ Barea and Raymond Felton have been the guys who've been taking over the point guard role. Devin Harris has been getting a few minutes in there at the point guard, shooting guard role as well. And I mean, basically, when you add in Wes Matthews, those four guys have been eating up the entire 96 minutes that, the point guard and shooting guard spots take over. Occasionally, you may even see three of them on the floor at the same time. So it's not like they're limited to 96 minutes. If you add up the minutes from the last couple of games, I think it actually comes a little bit over, because there have been, times where those four guys have been on the floor at the same time. Now, if you're looking at which guys to play, I do like Wes Matthews a little bit at the shooting guard spot, but his price is coming up a little. He still has been returning decent, solid, cash game value, I guess, but hasn't really shown much upside. Devin Harris is the one guy I wouldn't use, because I just think he's not getting enough minutes, which basically leaves us with the question of, Raymond Felton or JJ Barea. Now, Felton has been the more consistent of the two. He's playing 30-plus minutes of action in the last 3 games, so he's getting more court time than Barea is. And he's been consistently in that 25 to 30 fantasy point range. So he's getting more court time, and he's been consistent, but he hasn't really flashed the upside at all. But he also hasn't really flashed the downside. He's been just a solid option, somebody who I think is the guy you probably want to go with if you're playing in a cash game. Now, for a guy who's been more up and down, both with the scoring and his minutes. So he's given us a better upside. He's also shown us a lower floor, but we really don't know, because it's not like it's happening every single game. Last game, he had 38 fantasy points. The game before that, he had like 17. The game before that, he had 31. So as you can see, we're kind of fluctuating with the production that he's given us. Now, when you have that kind of situation, that usually screens out as a GPP play for me. Again, we haven't seen Felton really give us that 38, 40-point upside that Barea. He does have more upside there, but at the same point in time, Felton's playing more minutes, and he has been more consistently in his range, so he's the safer option. So again, this is a situation where you say, well, who do you like better, Felton or Barea? There really isn't an answer to it. If you say, would you rather use Felton in a cash game if I'm playing in a 50-50 or, maybe a head-to-head? Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because his points are safe. But if I'm trying to win a tournament, the guy who I think I want on my roster is probably JJ Barea, because he has a better chance of giving me a 35 or a 40-point game, which could pay off, 8 or 9x value for me at his price of, 4,000, 40-something hundred, whatever he's at today. Now, while we're talking about the Dallas Mavericks, one other guy that I did want to talk about, the big man rotation that they have going on. Obviously, Dirk is the guy who's playing the bulk of the minutes. They're giving a couple minutes to David Lee, a couple minutes to Dwight Powell, and a couple minutes to Salah Majri. Now, right now, I think the guy who I like the most is actually Dwight Powell. He's been playing a bunch of minutes. He was somebody who we talked about today in our NBA targets video. So if you're interested on why we think Powell is a good play today, make sure you check out the targets video as well as the injury report video when you're done here. Now, the next situation, Phoenix Suns big men situation. Now, Tyson Chandler was back for the last game, but it looks like he's doubtful for this one. He's got some back spasms, and that's never a good sign. With Phoenix not really having anything big to play for right now, I think there's a good chance that they either sit him out or limit him. Hopefully he sits, because then we don't have to worry about how many minutes he's actually going to be out there on the floor. Now, if Chandler does sit or is limited, that's going to leave Mirza Teletovic and John Lora as the only three healthy big guys that the Suns really have to roll out there. And honestly, Lora is not even really that healthy. He was active in the last game, but he saw only about 10 or 11 minutes after missing the game before and leaving the game before that early with an injury. I think Alex Len should be the guy who sees the biggest bump in both his minutes and his production if Tyson Chandler's out. He was in a pretty decent spot here already today at a price that's come down a little bit to right around $6,000. He was somebody that I ranked my short list using before that bumps Alex Len up and makes him a very interesting option who I want to have some shares of. A guy who's been seeing some extra minutes over the last couple games with Chandler out and Lore out has been Mirza Teletovic. They've had 3 of these 4 big guys in each of the last 3 games, and in each one of those games, Mirza has played at least 26 minutes, which is up a little bit from like the 20 to 25 minutes he had been playing. In his last 3 games, he's averaging 28 fantasy points with this time. So at a price of $4,700, that's basically the 6x kind of return that we need. If we hear that Chandler is out and we know that Lore is still banged up, I think it makes a lot of sense to roll Mirza out there. He could give you a 30-plus point fantasy game, which would be like a 6 to 7x return on your investment, and I think that would be pretty good for what we're looking to do today. Now, the last thing on is Pelicans. This team is an absolute mess right now. You got Anthony Davis out for the year. You got Ryan Anderson out. Drew Holiday and Alonzo G just got announced out for the rest of the year the other day. They're already without a guy like Eric Gordon. I mean, they're missing 5 or 6 of their best players or guys that were towards the top for their best players. Maybe Alonzo G excluded, but everybody else here is somebody who's a starter or a major contributor for them. And on top of it, you also have Norris Cole, who is out right now. So if Cole stays out with Drew out and Anderson out and Brow out and Alonzo G out, I mean, there's not a lot that this team has. The question that I ask myself is, all right, with all these guys out, who's going to play? And they really only have like 7 now. You got Douglas and Frazier, who are getting the point guard minutes. Douglas is probably good for 25 to 30. He's probably the better of the 2. I don't think either one of them is really great. Frazier's been playing a few less minutes, but has actually been putting up some pretty decent fantasy numbers there. His price is a lot cheaper than Douglas, so I guess that makes him a little more attractive. But I don't really think either one of them are great options. It's a huge upside coming out of either one of them. Alexis Ajinka, he's been seeing minutes at the power forward spot lately and, putting up some decent numbers with him. Again, his price is still really cheap. He's putting up decent numbers, and I can time him here because they just really don't have a lot of other guys on the roster. Outside of Ajinka, you're basically looking at, Amira Seek and Kendrick Perkins playing a center spot, getting big minutes. Ajinka is basically the only power forward they got left. A guy like Dante Cunningham can play a little power forward too. And he's actually been somebody who's seen a ton of minutes. Cunningham's playing 35 or more minutes in the last couple games, but he's not doing anything with it. He's still only getting you like 20-ish fantasy points. Plays a little bit, sets a big rebounder, not a big assist guy, not a great defender in terms of steals and blocks. Cunningham is in the minutes and a lot of people are talking about, but I just haven't seen him do anything with those minutes in order for me to feel comfortable that he has any upside. The only other guys they really have on the team are Luke Babbitt, who's been playing a little bit at the 2. They got Jordan Hamilton, who's been coming in as well. And that's really it. I mean, they're only dressing like 7 or 8 guys on this Pelicans team. So you would think that they have to get some production from somewhere. But remember, they do play the Spurs today, which is one of the worst matchups for an offense in all of, NBA DFS. I understand that somebody's got to score and somebody's got to rebound and, all these guys are incredibly cheap. Believe me, I understand all of that. But I just really don't think that there's a lot of guys on the Pelicans that are standing out to me. For GPPs, sure, I'd definitely take a shot on like maybe an Ajinka or in a Seek. Maybe grab like a Frazier or a Douglas in one of those GPPs or, if you really want to be bold and go with like a Babbitt or a Cunningham. I mean, like you said, somebody's got to score. But if the Spurs won this game 95 to 65, I don't think I would be all that shocked about it because this New Orleans Pelicans team, presently constructed, is probably the worst team in the NBA right now. And the Spurs, even without everybody playing, are still pretty good. And apparently they are going to have, at the very least, Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge, probably also going to have Tony Parker and Tim Duncan all viable and all available for this game. The one caveat I want to throw out there for people is I know everyone's talking about these Spurs guys who, LaMarcus had like 55 in his last game, and, Kawhi Leonard, great matchup against the New Orleans Pelicans. If anybody thinks that the guys on the Spurs are going to be playing big minutes here, I think it's a very risky proposition. I would not take them in cash as good a spot as it is for all those guys. And if I was going to use them in a tournament, I think it would be a situation where I decided to stack up a bunch of guys on both the Spurs and New Orleans and just kind of let it ride. There is a chance. I mean, there's always a chance that the game could stay close. And if it does stay close, I think it'll be low owned because most people are going to think it's turned into a blowout. But I would not use any of these guys in the core of my team that I'm building around, if I'm putting in 5 or 6 rosters to one of these, big finals that DraftKings has, one of these big championship tournaments that they have on DraftKings tonight. The only way I'd use them, like I said, is if I'm stacking them all up. And if I'm stacking them all up, I'm going to have, exposure to both sides of this game and throw in, 1 or 2 of my favorite studs and 1 or 2 of my favorite value plays to go along with it. That's the only way I really see, either side of this game making sense to take exposure to. So just keep that in mind when you see some of the injury news that comes out later. Like we said, the idea of this video is to kind of give you guys an idea of some of the things that we're looking at, because as we know, at this point in the season, crazy stuff happens all the time. I mean, last night at 6:30, a lot of us still had, Kevin Durant in our lineups until we heard that news that came out, and everybody was scrambling. We didn't know exactly what we wanted to do. A lot of people wound up throwing Paul George in there, spending up on a guy like James Harden or a guy like Russell Westbrook. Luckily we got another value play with Thad Young staying out, and we had a chance to use Thomas Robinson, who was 62% owned. And that's something that I wanted to also kind of let you guys know right now. We're to the point in the NBA DFS season where there's only really a lot of good players that are playing. If you're somebody who's a casual fan, you're probably not still playing NBA DFS at this point in time. So when we get this late breaking news, a lot of people are making those changes and making those swerves. We had tournaments I was in last night, tournaments, not cash games, tournaments where, Thomas Robinson was 60 and 70% owned on DraftKings last night. Cash games, he was 75, 85% owned in some spots. So, you got a lot of shrewd players out there. So just keep that in mind when you are building rosters. If you're trying to win a GPP, especially at this time of year, you got to go off the board a little bit, because if you just stay on, the absolute chalk from top to bottom, there's a reason why we've been having nights where everybody's scoring 280, 310 points and missing the cash line. It's because everybody's basically on the same guys. Everybody that's playing right now is kind of shrewd. If you're not willing to take some chances, there's a very good chance that you're not going to wind up getting to the top of the leaderboard and making some real money. So that sums it up for our DraftKings video for the day. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.